Yeah, we'll get started.
Yep, 37.
Oh boy, we're moving on up.
Yep.
So
I get these notifications from Substack every day. Change. You're number 11 in international and rising. You're number 7. You're number 27. It varies from. It's like a ridiculous count that makes no sense whatsoever,
no,
and
I've seen you up there. Yes.
it varies
Congr-
greatly. It has no logic to it whatsoever. But
Congratulations. Yes. Yeah, I know it is hard to sort of understand what this all means and how many people we reach, but I do think it's become a real alternate form of media, especially here in America, where people are not trusting the legacy media as much as they used to. And I mean, just like your reporting has become a real source of fact-based reporting on Israel that it's very hard to find. So
right, but
yeah.
it's a problem it's a real problem. The fact that people don't trust legacy media. I understand why they don't for obvious reasons, but the fact that people are getting their news from different sources. And that is, I think, one of the single biggest challenges that exists politically in the United States and the rest of the world, quite frankly. The fact, the old statement by, I don't know if you remember, Senator Moynihan, who said, "You're entitled to your opinions, but not your facts." And
Right.
now we've gone to the point where there are real facts and there are not real facts. I forgot what was said in the first Trump administration about facts, but
Yes.
that is a real problem.
Alternative
Also
facts.
facts,
Right.
right? Alternative
Yes.
facts. That's a real
Kellyanne
problem.
Conway. Yeah.
That's correct. It's a real problem. It's a real problem here in Israel too. We have Channel 14 in Israel, which is very much a government a BB spokesperson, where whatever it says is highly directed to what their message is. I remember sitting on Tuesday night and getting a push notification where that Channel 14 announced there were 15,000 people at the demonstration. Now I know what 15,000 people are, and I know what 100 and something thousand people were, and there were no 15,000. There was up in the hundreds of thousands, but
Yeah.
they don't want that to go through, and they have their own pollsters, and so the polls are skewed tremendously. And similar in America. Look, in America, Fox isn't good enough. You now have Epic News and you have Max. What's it, Max? I think Max News. I appeared on one.
Newsmax. Yeah. Yeah.
It's Newsmax.
Mm-hmm.
And I have people. Some of my readers know I post every week a radio show that I've been doing for it's about 18 years now. It's a guy down in Florida who used to be an American Express vice president. When he retired to Florida, he started this radio show. When I started, he was a normal Republican. Supported Marco Rubio, that sort of thing. He became a Trump supporter over the last since the beginning of the first Trump one. And we were talking the other day off radio, and he's also does not believe in government intervention, so he's getting a little unhappy with some of the things the Trump administration is doing at the moment in terms of intel and those things. But I asked him. He talked about something, I forgot what it was, and I said, "Well, why don't you at least read the Wall Street Journal? Forget, I wouldn't suggest the New York Times. The Wall Street, no, you can't trust the Wall Street Journal. I get most of my best news from social media." Really?
Yeah.
And this is someone who's most of your best news is from social media. And I think that's a real problem. I think it's been a problem for Israel this past 2 years also. The amount of news that comes via social media, and social media in of itself. I mean, television was always interested in people staying and watching, right? So it's not a new thing. The attention economy on that level is not new. It's something that's been going on, from the yellow journalism period.
Right.
But this particular case, it's extreme because uh, the income is directly related, not indirectly related, to the number of people who are clicking, watching, et cetera, et cetera. And what I think the old saying is, "If it bleeds, it leads." That
Yeah.
was a television line.
It certainly
So
is.
it's a real problem.
Yeah. So I just want to reset because a few people have come on board. Welcome, first of all, to everyone. I'm Rabbi Joshua Hammerman of the In This Moment, Rabbi's Notebook Substack. And I'm here with Marc Schulman, an old friend, and one of the go to experts on Israel that I always go to. He's the author of the Tel Aviv Diary Substack and also appears in many journalistic circles, educator, journalist, historian. Um, I couldn't recommend him more to find
Thank
out
you.
what's going on in Israel, and I think we're going to talk a little about America too. Um, so if you're just coming on board, please feel free to write in questions. I don't see them yet. I haven't done a Substack live before, so I hope I'll be able to see them. But if not, I apologize. You can also pound the heart if you'd like, just to let us know you're here. And
Okay.
so we'll
I'm seeing some of these questions, so I don't know.
All right. You know what? I'm on an iPad, so I don't maybe that makes a difference. So you
Um,
can give us the questions, but I want to follow up first of all. Um Channel 14 comparing it to Fox News. I've heard on other podcasts that it goes even far beyond. Now, I can't say it's less truthful than Fox. That's hard to do, but that, for instance, one of the issues that we certainly are dealing with right now is the situation in Gaza, having to do with the food and the provisions being brought in or not. And so videos that circulated on Channel 14 indicated that restaurants were open and marketplaces were thriving and all kinds of stuff is going on there that ended up being videos from a few years ago. Is that truth or not?
yeah, that's probably truth. I mean, I don't think the restaurants are doing great and all these other things. I can't see where they would possibly be existing at this point in Gaza. Look, Channel 14 is probably worse than Fox, actually, when I think about it. Fox News, per se, is sometimes okay. There's the daytime news. Fox gets really problematic when their opinion people get on in the evenings, I guess It is. Fox News tries to have some version of truth. Um, Not great, but sometimes they even criticize Trump every once in a while. Rarely, but every once in a while. That's not the case with Channel 14. Channel 14 um, is worse, and they lie all the time. That's what's really problematic. Just straight out lies, and you see it, and they attack people in ways that are pretty disgusting. And they're an extension of what's called here in Hebrew machanot ral, which is the poison machine. And the poison machine is what Netanyahu has been using almost throughout his career, but it's been in overtime in the last 2 years, which is to claim everybody who disagrees with him is poisonous in one way or another. He's a leftist, is a traitor, and so they managed to successfully point to the hostage families as being leftist supporters of Hamas. I even have this someone on my Facebook page keeps on every time I post from a rally. Oh, you're just a supporter of Hamas, etc. You're a patsy of Hamas, etc., etc. And that's part of what goes on, and that comes from Channel 14. The interesting thing that's happened, which is much to my sorrow, quite honestly, personal sorrow, is I-24 opened up a Hebrew channel about a year ago. um, I to this day don't quite understand it. They cut back tremendously their English, their
Right. And you
Arabic.
appear pretty often on there, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you've
but
been on.
I appear much less often. I used to appear very often. They used to
Uh-huh.
pay. And they stopped paying. They did stop paying after I had appeared for a month on the Hebrew. And they said, "Oh, we don't pay in Hebrew." So that was a bit of a shock, to say
You
the
pay
least.
from
And
left to right instead of right to left. Is that
yes,
it?
I don't know. I don't know what
Okay.
the payment, but they
Yeah.
did that. So I still appear, but I do it from home on Zoom. No, don't go bother going down to Jaffa in order not to get paid. Um, and I do it less. Um, but that's not the point. The point is, I thought they were doing a vital service, which was getting out Israel's word as much as possible. And until they opened up the Hebrew channel, I could not tell that they had any political bias whatsoever. I was on for 9 years practically on a very regular basis, and I could not discern any political bias one way or the other. Whenever I was on, I would usually be brought on something. On Israeli matters, it'll be all sorts of things. But in terms of American politics, I would be being brought on as the opponent of Trump, let's put it that way. But they always had the support of Trump there at the same time. So it was never one way or the other. But no, now in terms of the Hebrew shows, they are strongly similar to Channel 14. They're on they're on Shabbat, while Channel 14 is not on Shabbat. So they're considered the Channel 14 of Shabbat. Um,
It
so
seems to me. It seems to me that there are a lot of important questions that we could be covering here, but the whole question of the free press and the responsibility of media is crucial in both countries. Now, maybe it's a grass is always greener perspective that I have, but I watch the Israeli media a lot. I know Hebrew well enough to understand. I also listen to podcasts. I think is still a greater degree of independence in the Israeli media when it comes to dealing with the government and skepticism than the American legacy media, meaning the major cable stations and major networks, who aren't used to dealing with an authoritarian, illiberal ruler. They're getting used to it, but they're getting used to it in the wrong way by sort of giving in, especially
but
since we're dealing with ownership situations,
yeah.
such as Paramount, that are compelling it to give in.
Well, you touched the point, I think, more than anything else. Um, once upon a time, American media was family owned to a very large extent, was independent, was local, all of those things. And over the consolidation over the last 20 or 30 years, I think Washington Post is Bezos's, and that's a whole other story, but it's not independent because Bezos has business interests. So every single major media outlet, with the exception of the New York Times, is owned by some significant conglomerate of some kind or another, which has many other interests in front of the government. And the media part of their businesses tends to be one of their smaller parts of their business. So, ABC News versus Disney's whole business is only a small percentage of their revenue. And we can go right on through almost everybody.
Right.
And in all cases, it's a small percentage. And therefore, do they want to risk, the ire of Donald Trump, so to speak, or the Republicans, whoever you want to talk about it? No, they don't. And that's the real problem of government ownership. And so you have one independent media, which is NPR. And
The
look what they're trying to do to shut that down because
Corporation of Public Broadcasting,
broadcasting is
it's
closed,
yeah,
but you still have the
yeah.
independent stations. But that's what's left, really.
Yeah, no,
And
but basically, and Substack right now,
well, some say it's
It-
independent,
and
right? We're
and
all
you,
independent,
we're
right?
all independent, but
We're all
it's
independent. But
and
I fear for the Substack model because the reality is, and I see this also. I'm also an app developer, and everything went to subscriptions. But there's
yeah,
a fatigue of subscriptions. I know myself. How many things can I subscribe to? It was very nice. It used to be, be in this when I was living in the States. I'd subscribe to the New York Times, maybe the Wall Street Journal some years, depending. Get the Economist and maybe Newsweek or something, a Time magazine, and that was it. I got all the news I needed. I didn't have to have 50 Substacks and subscriptions to 20 different apps. And I don't know. This is
I think it's going to consolidate eventually, and a lot of Substackers like myself rely primarily on generosity of a few people, but provide most of my information for free because I really want to make sure that my stuff gets out there. But yeah, I do think that there's a concern there, especially even without the cost considered. There are a whole lot of people writing right now, but that also is creating a sort of an exciting gold rush mentality where everyone wants to get in on it. I'd like to see streaming services consolidate too. I can't afford Netflix and HBO and all these others, but I think that's happening too. So it's going to sort itself out. But in the meantime, we're here, and I want to get to what you do because you've been doing Tel Aviv Diary 6 days a week since the war began. And I have a feeling you didn't think 2 years later you'd still be doing it 6 days a week.
no,
And
absolutely.
you are diligent, and you are also thorough and, as I said, fact-based. In a world where everyone has an axe to grind, how do you avoid that? And how do you figure out what to print, what not, whether a hospital has truly been bombed or whether it's staged. How do you sort through the news and figure out what you think is worth printing?
Okay, so there are two parts to that. First, I mean, I rely 90% of what I write as secondary sources. Every once in a while, I have primary sources. I know some military people, I know others, and I get some firsthand reports, but most of it is secondary. But I also know who's reporting what and how they're reporting it. So, for instance, there's going to be some sort of news story that's going to break maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow morning. I know that for a fact. I know what it is, but I won't say it because it'll break censorship. And but I know
I
it
mean,
by the.
just to translate for everyone else, that probably doesn't mean good news. Maybe not.
Oh
You don't
no,
have to tell me.
well, whatever. I'm not going to say because I'm not even 100% sure. Well, my point being is, I
Whenever you
can
hear the
tell.
words "release for publication," that
Right,
usually precedes something not good.
right,
But
right.
okay, I mean,
I'm not
as
sure. I'm
in
not sure that's what it's going to be. But leave that part aside.
okay, all
I can
right.
know in advance because I've been following these people long enough, and some of them I know personally, that when they talk in a certain way, they're talking about something they can't talk about. And then I know it's true because it's something they can't talk about. I mean, it's true. There are other sources. You get to know which sources are you can follow, which are true, which are not, what Telegram channels are telling the truth, which are making things up along the way. We were talking offline beforehand that I was involved in a school that you helped us with, which was the Carmel Academy. And I talked about the fact that um, the whole idea was we were going to be militantly centrist. And I try to be that as much as possible in my political views in terms of covering Israel as much as possible, although it's very difficult in terms of the current government, which I happen to think is abhorrent. So I can't really be totally independent when it comes to the government. And yet, I try my best. Let's put it that way. And I always have a problem when I write. I try to be as accurate as I can. I think three times, to be honest, and then I'll usually write it, but I still think three times, how will this play outside of Israel? This is, I have a daughter in the States who complains to me, you can't write that. They hate us enough already. But I try to explain to her that if people are going to believe what I write, I have to write the truth. And I can't censor what I write because otherwise, who would believe me? I'm not a spokesman for the government. They didn't sign up to be a spokesman for the government. Once upon a time, I sort of things, but I don't do them now. And therefore, I have to tell the truth as best as I know it in order to maintain credibility, in order for truth. I believe in truth very much so. Um, Look, it gets very difficult when it comes to what's going on in Gaza. It's very, very difficult because the knowledge is triply filtered.
Yeah.
It's filtered in terms of official sources, unofficial sources, what Hamas is trying to get out there. And that what Hamas is trying to get out there is probably wrong, but maybe based on some truths as well. So it gets very, very difficult when you're trying to say what is actually happening in Gaza. Look, we know it's bad. But
Mhm.
any place after 2 years of war, it's going to be bad. One of the things, and anyone who's listened or read what I was saying, I'm far from a supporter of this government right now, as I just said a moment ago. But I also think it's a little bit unfair, all this talk about what Israel should be doing, because the reality is Hamas could surrender. I mean, in any normal war, Hamas would have surrendered. Your
Right.
leadership has been decimated. You have no control over food or anything else. The Israeli army can go anywhere as it wants to if it really wants to go. Normally, in any normal situation, Hamas would surrender.
A-
And at this
a-
moment,
And the war
you
would
know,
be over right away.
instantly, instantly.
Which is,
So
can I just cut in for a second? Which is the argument, and I'm not going to get into the whole issue of genocide, but that is the argument to be made, that it isn't, because it is clearly a matter of if Hamas were to end this and they have it within their power to do that, there would be no displacement of populations. There would be no more starvation. There is not intent to kill the population. Anyway, I'm sorry. That was
I
just a
know
little,
that's the point. I mean, look, one of the genocide thing is an interesting point, right? There was genocide sounds terrible. Now,
yeah.
but by all legal definitions of genocide, this is not a genocide. I am quite sure that Israel has committed some war crimes, as in any war.
which I
Um,
agree. Hmm.
right. America committed plenty of war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan, without a doubt. Russia is committing thousands of war crimes all the time in Ukraine, and we can go on. But it's not a genocide. Um, but it sounds good. It's a good way of attacking Israel. Genocidal. I forgot what some of our critics have called it, but um, it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not. It's
So,
not.
so your daughter, being here in America, is facing what so many American Jews are right now. We feel like we're being squozen into a vice where, on the one hand, we certainly don't want to support an administration that is trying to end democracy as we know it. On the other hand, there is real anti Semitism that the administration is purporting to defend us from, although we know that this is not, a country that we would want to live in, whether or not we feel protected, if democracy were to be sacrificed. So, we're sort of between a rock and a hard place. And within the Jewish community, there's just a tremendous amount of argumentation going on over how best to approach this, whether to make waves, whether to criticize the government, or whether to sort of sit back, whether to criticize the Israeli government, or whether to sort of let this play out. And it's been to our detriment.
No, it's an impossible situation. I mean, if you look at the history of American Jewry, American Jews have never been in this weird situation where, on one hand, they've never been stronger financially, economically, even politically. Number of Jewish senators and all those sort of things. On the other hand, it's really very, very difficult. I mean, the two parts to that. There's the part you just talked about, obviously, and then there's the Israeli part as well. Where do you come down on the side? How much are you supposed to defend Israel blindly, not blindly? How do you find the right balance, which is not easy? The problem is the other side has gone way to the other extreme, right? In other words, to criticize the state of Israel, right ahead, criticize any particular action that the state of Israel takes. Mistakes are made. Maybe it's the wrong position. Obviously, this current government makes decisions that you and I would not agree with. However, the other side of this is we've gotten to the point where our critics, including some significant people in the Democratic Party, question whether we have a right to exist at all.
Yeah.
And the moment you cross over there, you've crossed into deep anti-Semitism. And so that
Well, I mean, it's on both sides at this point. Anti-Semitism is just rampant, especially on the extremes. But of course, even in the White House, I find it interesting that they are following the Orban plan almost to a T. Now attacking George Soros, through through legal action and whatever. I mean, it's like exactly how Hungary deals with it, and I see any attack on someone like Soros as anti-Semitism.
Right,
But
clearly it was,
yeah,
but it's been going on for a while. The Soros attack has been he's been a lightning rod now for about 7 or 8 years. And I spoke years ago to my Jewish Republican friends. I don't have many, but I have a few. And I said, "Will you please find a different target? Why are
yeah,
you why are you repeating things against Soros? Find somebody else. There got to be somebody else. I mean, there are plenty of rich donors to the Democrats whose name is not Soros."
right. Yeah,
Um,
why do you have to give us all Soros from that?
right.
Um, so I guess I want to make sure to get to this question, and that is both countries are expecting elections next year. Israel, and you can give us the latest, but it seems like it would be earlier than October, although maybe as late as October, but definitely at some point next year. And in both countries, the administration, the current government, seems to be on the short end of the polls. Um, First of all, do you think that will carry out? And do you think there will be elections? And I guess the broader question is, which democracy is in the greatest danger right now?
That's a hard question. Which one's the hard and the greatest danger? The interesting. I'll step back and then I'll try to answer your question. During the first Trump administration, I must have written at least half a dozen articles for Newsweek comparing Netanyahu and Trump. and how they were two identical in different ways. I thought that Netanyahu was smarter, a few other things, but lots and lots of articles I wrote over a period of time. Now it's gotten even worse, obviously. Um, and the
and
parallels are
they're enabling each other, which
absolutely,
is
the parallels are much stronger. Now, I think in both cases there'll be an election. I think the big question is how much effort will be made in both cases to suppress the opposition. So in the United States' case, you have this attempt at redistricting, and to try to create additional Republican districts and therefore decrease the chances of the Democrats taking over the House of Representatives. That's the current plan as far as I can see, plus whatever media manipulations that will be done, I think getting close to the elections, and all sorts of claims possibly about Democratic lawmakers charging them with crimes is a real possibility too. I think we can't
and
ignore that
and putting military in the cities.
in the city, right? Hey, we can't ignore that as a possibility. But
Yeah.
um, in Israel, I think we're looking at the same thing. Um, I think we're talking about the attempt to disenfranchise the Arab vote, depress the Arab vote as much as possible. I think that's a major goal at the moment, because if you depress the Arab vote, you have a greater chance of the current government maintaining, even if it doesn't win the election, staying in power, because no one can put together a government, in which case a caretaker government continues with Netanyahu as the head.
Just so
Um,
people know that that's 20% of the population, Arab Israelis, and that's a significant voting bloc.
right, but they only generally represent only about 10% of the parliament. In other words,
Mm.
they're not, because their turnout is not as high as the Jewish turnout, and because some of them vote for the Jewish parties. So, so the current Knesset has, I think, 12 members from the Arab parties, and so it's about 10%. But obviously, if they weren't there, or if they're less there, that would obviously tilt things towards the right up, mostly, not completely. The other thing, I mean, keep in mind, there are often unintended consequences. The same way I've listened to a couple of experts in terms of the what's being done in terms of the United States, in terms of, let's say, Texas, attempting to create more Republican districts. But some experts are looking at the districts. I mean, the reason the districts existed to this date was to carve out as many districts as possible, that there wasn't a chance that the incumbent would be ousted by somebody else. So as many Republican districts as possible were carved out to ensure the fact that the incumbent stays in power. Now they're trying to fine tune it, but by fine tuning it, they're also bringing the chance that they may bring some more Democrats into these districts, and suddenly a district that's not competitive at all might suddenly become competitive. So, eh, you know, all the brilliant people plotting all sorts of brilliant plans, sometimes the unintended consequences can be not what they expect. The same way in terms of the Arab vote, if you do your best to try to suppress it, sometimes the opposite takes place. People come out dafka just because, and they come out and vote. So I think that's a possibility as well. So, having said all that, we have clear undemocratic elements both in Israel and in the United States. In the United States, um, I'm not even sure what the ideological basis is. In Israel, there's an ideological basis. There's a basis that, we should be a Torah state, and that we should be a state run based on what's in the Torah, and therefore we don't need a democracy. I mean, you can't think of a less democratic society than the ultra-Orthodox society. Um, and it works just fine for them. At least that's what they think. So they don't see why it shouldn't be for the rest of the country. Um, in America, it's really a matter of naked power, I think, more than anything else, because there's no ideological, conservative, even MAGA basis that says elections shouldn't take place. But there's a naked power draft, and I think that's a real concern, obviously. So,
Yeah, I don't know that Israelis are because you're pretty busy right now, but our capital is being occupied by by someone who's crazy. I mean, the tariffs have destroyed our economy. There was a red carpet for the most evil dictator in the world last week, and a slap, to the European allies. The FBI is going after Trump's enemies. And oh, by the way, we're getting rid of mRNA vaccines and making it impossible for people to protect themselves from disease. And we're going to try to steal a few congressional seats. Do Israelis, Israelis who support Trump, and I understand that no other country does the population give the support to Trump as Israel, and he'll probably go there to reward them. Do they understand? Do they what planet would one be able to live on to put the fate of your country in the hands of this man, your nation's security, a man who has expressed anti-Semitism on any number of occasions, and who wouldn't hesitate for a second to discard, an old friend for the sake of opportunity. I mean, do Israelis understand it?
Okay, two parts. And I, by the way, would disagree with you. I don't think as an individual he's anti-Semitic, and I don't think as a person I think he actually likes Israel. I mean, I can say I can go way back. I was the executive director of the Israel Day Parade for the 40th anniversary, and he's one of my grand marshals, going all the way back that far. But uh, Israelis let me put it this way: Israelis who follow any news at this point understand the man is a little crazy. There's no question about it. That he's unpredictable. Even his supporters say that. Even in America, they clearly think he's unpredictable, and he could turn on us in a minute. That's true, and he changes his mind. Any given day. There was a lot of anger here last week or this past week when he talked about not having 20 hostages still alive. That drove everybody crazy because the Israeli
Yeah,
government claims there's still 20 alive. Maybe he's telling the truth. We don't know, but there is that sense. Now, the sense of all the bad things he's doing. I mean, Israel's being hurt by the tariffs also, but it was a small news item and it passed quickly. Um, the other issues that you just described, I don't think if I only watched Israeli news, I would know of very many of them, to be honest with you. The National Guard in the streets, I don't think I've seen one article in one television showing about it. I don't even think I've seen an article in most of the major papers, at least not on the front few pages. Um, the other issues that, like I said, the tariffs, I actually think I've changed my mind on tariffs, by the way. The way they're being implemented is crazy, but I realize that the Republican Party of the United States will never, ever raise taxes. And this America will go bankrupt unless it raises taxes. This is going to bring in a lot of money, possibly. It's the worst type of tax. It's
yes, on the
but
poor.
yeah, but listen, Israel has a VAT. I mean,
Yeah,
it's equivalent to a VAT except hidden.
yeah.
So, on that sense, even though I think it's like I said, it's the worst form of taxation, but it's better than no taxation, to be quite honest with you, because America can't afford the tax cuts that have gone in effect in the United States over the last 40 years. Just can't afford it. So this is a little bit of a balance, and I've come around. I went crazy when when the tariffs were first, and of course the implications
Uh-huh.
is insane. Brazil 50% because he doesn't like what's being done to Bolsonaro. 50% on India. All these things are
It,
nuts. But
it's on a whim. Did
right.
you realize that we live in the two our two countries in that sense are the two most hated countries on earth right now?
Yeah, it's
Uh,
really it's a wonderful feeling. Which passport should I use when I travel? Which is more likely?
I
Um,
wouldn't use it as a yarmulke. That's
well, it's okay. I don't wear one, but I don't. But I'll still fly. I'll still travel in my U.S. passport just because Israelis is still a higher level target. Um,
it's just so hard to conceive because living in America right now, I mean over half the country did not vote for him, and I would say that now his popularity is down. Trump's down, well below 40% or in that range, and it's going to show up if there's a fair election next year, and yet you go to Canada, you go anywhere else in the world, and this is America is now seen as that, as a quasi illiberal, nearly fascistic country that deports people on a whim, and it takes on the personality of its leader. Israel as well, and I have to say, I deal with lots of students, as you know, and um, for 37 years, I was at Bethel in Stamford, and I hear from these kids who are no longer kids, any adult who's in their 20s or yeah, even up to 25, 30 has only lived in a Netanyahu type Israel. They have no concept of the Israel, and you wrote this beautifully about your aliyah, the Israel that we grew up in, the American Jewry that we grew up in with the Soviet Jewry rallies and that you also were involved in. And they cannot take pride in either country right now. So I'm going to ask another question that is related to this. You're a historian. I'm a believer in the sort of the great men theory, to some extent. I think that, if either of them are out of power and with Netanyahu going to come as soon as next year, things could change on a dime. That the that if it's the right government, I was shocked at how much I appreciated Naftali Bennett when he was prime minister, because he did it with honor and dignity and shared it with Lapid in a manner that I didn't expect him to do. Anyone else, and it could well be Bennett, anyone else could change Israel's image, could change everything very quickly. Do you agree with that?
Partially. So let me say how I agree with it and how I disagree with it. Look, there were a lot of problems with the Netanyahu government and policies and everything else. The biggest problem with the Netanyahu government from the point of view of an Israeli is that it's totally incompetent. It's full of ministers who don't know what they're doing, have no experience in what they're doing, full of all sorts of party functionaries who've been given all sorts of jobs. And whether it's in the railroad or across the board, incompetent people doing jobs what they shouldn't be doing. So from an Israeli perspective, step one is to get competency back in government. I was saying same thing is happening, of course, in America these days. All expertise is leaving American government. Anyone who knows anything is either being fired or is running for the hills. And so it's a very problematic situation. A bunch of flunkies being put into positions in return. Now, it's not easy to get rid of all these people once you have a real government in place that follows the rules. So both America and Israel are going to have that problem in the post. If Trump is gone in 3 years, but the government is full of Trump flunkies, and Supreme Court is, God forbid he has another appointee to the Supreme Court.
Right.
But all the district courts and everything else, these people are going to be around for a long time. And in Israel, we have the same situation. It's going to be a real problem. But see, in Israel has a much more fundamental problem than America does. And, I look at America and I try to figure out what divides Americans. Throw away the party, right? Take a mix of Americans of, various ethnicities, but let's leave the ethnicity aside for 2 seconds. With various parts, from different parts of the country, liberals, conservatives, centrists, etc. Don't say who they are and what they are. Put them in a room, and probably until you hit issues of religion a little bit, when I'm talking about abortion and things that are relating to religion in some form, and sexuality, maybe a little bit too. But other than that, they're going to agree on most things. Most Americans think most Americans think that the rich should pay higher taxes. Most Americans believe in civil liberties for everybody. And most Americans believe in press freedom, even though they think, press hasn't always been great. Most Americans believe in the Constitution, basically. There's a U.S. Constitution, and what was always defined as what it means to be American was to believe in the Constitution. Some of them haven't been learning that much about it in schools, which is a whole other question we can get into. But basically, there's a founding document that everyone agrees with to a very large extent. You have originalists, you have, in terms of how you interpret it, etc. But by and large, most of the things that we see in the Constitution are accepted by most people, and most people accept the idea of a progressive tax system as well. And so what's dividing Americans? Abortion already is less of on the table anymore. Transgender rights. I mean, get this talk. Yes, it's become a big issue, but we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're going. I can answer the question in one word, and it begins with R and ends in acism. And, what divides America is what happened between the years 1860 and 1865 and why. And I don't think we've come to any agreement on that yet. I mean, we're still renaming, statues and
Uh,
forts.
I think that's an outlier. I really do think it's an outlier. Yes,
I mean, I don't think racism is an outlier.
no, racism will always exist anywhere in the world, but I think it's different. I think it's changed. I think um, America is a much less racist society today than it was 50 years ago. The idea of interracial marriage and dating and all these things have become so normalized in the culture. And I think it's very, very different. I think we have to
It's
realize
true. We're
how
taking a
far
huge step backwards now, right? Though,
we're talking.
banning books, etc.
Yeah, but that's a different sort of thing. Those are the banning books again has to do with the fringes. And I think most Americans would agree in that they don't believe in banning books. We have fringe issues, like I said, of transgender, but those are fringe issues, relatively speaking. Israel has some really deep divides, though. Keep in mind, we have much deeper divides. So as I would define I was discussing it with my wife earlier today, and we were talking about different arguments, and the one of the most basic differences between Israelis, I think, are those people who think that the most important thing is the land of Israel, and those people think the most important thing is the people of Israel. And what do I mean by that? In other words, the people on the far right and the settlers and those think that the most important thing to do is to hold on to every little bit of land because God gave it to us, and we have a commandment to hold on to all of that land. That's what the settle movement is all about, more than anything else. I mean, yes, some people who move there for security reasons. There are certainly people who move there because it was cheap, but the ideological leaders of that movement, who are important in the Likud these days, which is part of a different set of issues, that's their basic belief. The belief of someone like me is I'm not that interested. I mean, I don't dislike the land. I like the land of Israel, but I'm much more interested in the people of Israel. And I'm much more interested in building the technologies of Israel and the wealth of Israel and all those things. And the land is much less important to me. And that is a real basic divide. Now, we have subdivides or separate divides. The issue between the Haredim, the ultra Orthodox, and the rest of society is a big issue. It's an issue that, according to some economists, will destroy the country because if you look at the economics, they basically, the average Haredi takes in 7,000 shekels a month from the government, and the average secular Tel Avivi puts in 7,000 shekels. So I'm rounding it in large numbers, but the bottom line is they take money, the others put money in, but their percentage of the population is growing every year,
You
and
know,
so that
I'm sorry that I don't mean to cut in, but it's fascinating because if you take that divide and instead of saying Haredim who take and the Tel Avivis who give, you substitute California for many red states, and that is sort of at the essence of what right now is going to be coming to a head in America. With the Great Divide is a federal state or a state by state divide, which Trump is promoting in trying to wage war against blue state large cities. Anyway,
yeah, but
continue.
that's fake. But that's ultimately fake. It's not real. It's a demographic makeup. It's something that's being used to create divisions. Some of it, of course, is the cultural. The book that came out 20 years ago. I guess it's 20 years now. Maybe it's in 30. What's Wrong with Kansas? I don't know if you remember that book.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was a book. It was a book that came out um, 20, 30 years ago by a political scientist, and he said, "Okay, the Kansans." Union workers, they worked at that time for McDonnell Douglas and all those sort of things, should be traditional Democratic voters, and yet they voted Republican. And so, why could the Democrats not win Kansas? That was because of social issues that the Republicans managed to fake at the time to be their calling card, and then they went and lowered taxes on the rich. But why were they falling for it? And that's really still very much the case. But it's not the same sort of divide as between if you sat in a room together with someone from Kansas, you could sit and have a conversation about lots of things, I'm quite sure. Almost, assuming the person's educated, obviously. Same level of education, if he's a Republican, you could talk for hours about who knows what. Um,
I
you
do
know,
think that could happen. Yeah. I mean, do you think a Haredi, could talk to someone from Tel Aviv at this point and speak the same language?
I've had a conversation with one of my readers, which is strangely a Haredi person from Brooklyn, and we were able to speak, but we're speaking different languages. It's not. It's not easy.
Even if
Um,
they'd watched Shtizel?
well,
No,
they
I'm
don't
just
watch.
kidding.
They don't watch anything. They only they have
No, I mean,
they have,
the Tel Avivi. But,
yeah.
yeah,
No, no. I understand Haredi a little bit. I can't say I understand really deep, but I don't. You know, the longer I spoke to him, I liked the guy, but I understood him even less. Um,
yeah. I mean, you also
so
have an educational system there that is designed to keep populations separate,
right, that was one of the look. I
and
think
the
Ben
army.
Gurion was. I think Ben Gurion was one of the great leaders of the Jewish people ever. He made two major mistakes. The biggest one was agreeing not to have a constitution.
Yeah.
The first Knesset was supposed to be the Constitutional Convention, and he walked away from that because he was afraid of the fights. And B, agreeing to separate educational systems. The fact that there are separate educational systems in this country is not a disaster, but a big problem. Let's put it that way. And when it comes to the ultra orthodox education, it's a disaster. Um, so yes, those are, but those divides are really, really strong and big. But beyond that, you talk about California versus Nebraska, whatever. Okay, California gives more taxes than Nebraska does. The people in Nebraska work. It's not like the people in California are lucky to work for Apple or Nvidia or whatever it might be, and the people in Nebraska are working on a farm or working for Walmart, but they're working. They're attempting to. They're not asking the people from California to support them. I mean, it may end up supporting them in some way or another, but it's not
Mm,
a direct ask.
right. I also didn't before I talked about all the things Trump is doing, I didn't mention denying a lot of millions of people health care that, is probably not being covered in Israel either.
No,
Um,
and what's not being covered, which in my mind, the craziest thing, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of Trump,
yeah.
is his approach to the environment. I
Oh my
don't.
god.
And I know there's an article in today's Times how he's trying to get other countries to walk away from their environmental things and using trade as a leverage to force them to give up their environmental standards.
The
Now,
wind farms in Connecticut, where I live,
right,
and Rhode Island, are 80% complete and ready, almost operational, and Trump stopped them. You know,
yeah,
just for spite to own the windy libs. I have no idea, but they're taking him to court, as is going to happen with everything that he does. Yeah, we're in a tough place. So, I wanna let's go for, like, 5 or 10 more minutes. I don't wanna take up too much of your time, but, couple of quickies here. Um, so do you think I mean, do you sense that things are going to get better in next year because of these elections? Do you have a gut feeling?
okay. My gut feeling is that this government will not be reelected. That's my gut. We've been there before. Only once we had. I mean, we lived through a period. My son. When he turned 18 in the 3 years afterwards, when first time he voted like 7 times, which was including the municipal elections, which was ridiculous. I mean, he had never voted, and suddenly he was voting many, many times in a very short period of time. So we were there before. Netanyahu, I think, is the worst prime minister in Israel's history, but the best politician in Israel's history. So I don't write him off at all in terms of the politics. He's been a tremendously successful politician. I think um, he's getting older in the same way that Trump is getting older, and we're sort of ignoring both cases. But you know,
We're not ignoring it here.
no, but
We're
no,
taking lots of pictures. Yes, I
yeah.
know. No, I know what you're saying. Yeah, I
Look,
mean,
Eric, look, there's something really wrong with American politicians. We're both more or less the same age. And while I hope to have many years of activity, et cetera, I don't think at my age even, I'm younger than him or Biden was or Netanyahu. I don't think that that's really the right job for me.
yeah.
10 years ago, it was the right time was to be one of these jobs. Why these people think they should take on these jobs at these ages is beyond me. But okay, I don't write him off. I think the effort will be tremendous in order to make sure that these people are not elected. I think I think there's a broad enough sense And it goes beyond the politics of right, left, which, again, is very not clear at the moment. Let's put it that way. It's not clear what it means to be a leftist in Israel. I mean, a leftist is whoever Netanyahu doesn't support. Netanyahu is now called a leftist. But in terms of actual beliefs, left is not very far left compared to what it once was. And I think there are enough Israelis who would normally have voted for Netanyahu, for instance, or this current government, who are just so fed up with its incompetence and realize that we need competence more than anything else. And I think Bennett will probably be a good choice. The interesting thing I heard today, which I hadn't known, was who were the people surrounding him. And he took basically people from the high-tech world who are centrist high-tech people. And those are his support, his close supporters and etc. And that's encouraging. Let's put it that way. I think he will run a competent administration. I think he'll pull us back from the worst things. I don't know where we're going to stand at the end of this war. I don't know that we can, in terms of the world, it's not going to be simple. Once people get into Gaza, it's not going to get better.
But I know you've said that it's at this point the sticking point for Netanyahu has always been the day after, and whether the PA could be involved in that. I mean, I think I agree with this that it's there's going to have to be some kind of Arab governance, and the PA probably it's not perfect, but at least it's something. And the Saudis and the Egyptians and everyone else will need to be part of this. Do you see that happening?
I don't see anything else happening. It's the ones we signed an agreement with. It's the ones that Netanyahu signed an agreement with, including the Y agreements, which were in 2000 and it was 1999. So these are the people we have agreements with.
But he won't
There's
agree
no
with
one.
them now. He
What?
doesn't. He won't let them now
No, it
be
wasn't
part of
anything
the
that. But
solution.
politically, they're verboten. You can't talk about
Yeah,
them in any possible way. And also, look, the whole policy of supporting Hamas was to provide an alternative to the PA. It was to say, how can we have peace negotiations that split up? And there's the Hamas and all these other things. So,
yeah,
I mean, Smotrich went around saying publicly before the war that Hamas is an asset. So Netanyahu has a big problem getting down from that hill. Now, I also look at some point. First of all, there will be a national commission of inquiry after the elections. It won't happen before. But the reality is, people at the moment have some people have forgotten, but most people haven't.
yeah,
And there is no place in the world where someone who is responsible for October 7th would be able to remain in power, with the exception of Russia. That's the
yeah,
reality.
right.
So
And
I don't.
and you spoke about, I'm sorry, the rally last week. That was very reassuring for me, and I think for a lot of American Jews. And I've talked to a lot of people over the last few weeks. In fact, Rachel Maddow even covered it on MSNBC. This is the true Israel. These 350,000 or up to 1 million who are on the streets protesting, saying, we want the hostages out, we want the war over, opposing the government pretty much. This is the true Israel that, I can tell my 20 something they can be proud of.
Yes, but being part of that is an incredibly frustrating experience. I go to these rallies not because I think they're going to accomplish anything. I go because of the families, and because I want to support the families, and the families to know that people care about them. This has been a couple of years now of demonstrations. Obviously, it started with the attempt of judicial coup, but judicial coup we were trying to stop something from happening, which is easier in my mind and in reality than to actively get the government to agree to something, especially when it doesn't want to agree to it. And
Yeah,
so I think that's part of the reason why people have been so frustrated, is the fact that it's hard to get people to feel like we're really doing something. And it's frustrating. There's no question about it. It's
yeah.
frustrating.
But those rallies, including the ones before October 7th, the judicial coup, I think are inspiring to many of us here because I think Israel has a better chance of having free and fair elections next year because of the resilience of the people and the ability to stand up to the government that the government is a little bit afraid of. Whereas here in America, we've had our No Kings rallies, we've had several of them, but we haven't really reached that point of passion yet that I've seen in Israel that I really admire. What America has is a constitution and institutional advantages to stand up to the president, including the state government, the judiciary. But it's going to be interesting. I want to ask you one more question, Mark, and I really appreciate this. I hope we'll get to do it again sometime.
We
But
had
I'm
some
sorry if I've
questions
been
in your thing. So
firing. I have
no
so
question.
much I've been wanting to ask. So my 20-something student who's very skeptical about Israel and who feels very let down. And I can't argue with them that they shouldn't feel let down. They feel let down. What can you tell them, sort of regalechat on one foot, in terms of love, not to disprove any of the issues, but what do you love about Israel? What should they love about Israel?
Oh boy, you're really putting me on the spot there.
One,
You know,
well, or think back to
it,
why you made
oh,
Aliyah.
okay, but I understand something. I mean, so I fell in love with the country the first time I visited when I was 10. And it's a visceral love, and it's been a visceral love for me my whole life. And I, as you know, I spent many years not in Israel in between, from the first time I moved and the second time and the third time I moved back permanently 14 years ago. And whenever I'm not here, I don't feel like I'm home. This has always felt, true home. I mean, yes, as long as my parents were alive, there was a home for me in America in a certain sense because but this was always been home. There are a couple of things that make Israel really special beyond there's all the traditional Zionist things, why we need a Jewish state, and all those things are true, more true today than they've ever been. The Herzlian view of why Zionism should exist, because the Jewish people need to have their own state and their own army. All those things I think have been proven many, many times true. The mistake that he'd made was he thought that a Jewish state would be a normal state. He didn't realize it would be a state of the Jews, and the people would hate it because it's a state of the Jews anyway. But to say the Jews can defend itself, the individual Jews can't defend themselves. So I think all those things were true, and I was and remain a classic Zionist. But the other difference is there is a shared fate here that exists that I don't certainly doesn't exist in the United States. That almost everybody who you run into, who you meet, whether it's on a train, on a bus, casually, not casually, everybody has the sense that we're in this together. Even disagree politically, disagree in other ways. There is that belief that we're in this together. And obviously, last 2 years have pushed that even more. So even though we disagree sometimes politically, and some of us want the war to end tomorrow, and some of us, but we also all were together in our air raid shelter when missiles hit 2 blocks away. And it didn't differentiate between different political views. It attacked us because we were Israelis, because we were Jews. And that sense of belonging, of being part of a unique adventure, an adventure in the sense of the Jewish history and this point in Jewish life, I think um, is one of the things that makes this a very special place. Look, it's not an easy place to live. I'm not sure that I would recommend the average American Jew at this point. I wouldn't recommend move here, to be honest with you, at least not with a lot of preparation. Even before the war and all those changes, my feeling was I came back with unique advantages. My Hebrew was fluent. I'd served in the army. So to me, I was fully accepted in society. I'm not sure what that would be like if I didn't have those things. But it's hard to explain the the sense of not worrying about being Jewish. That's also, a major thing. Who's your neighbor? I'm thinking back to my parents' neighborhood or wherever it was. Who moved in? Are there more Jews moved in? Is the community getting more Jewish, less Jewish? All those sort of things. I don't care about that here. It's not an issue here whatsoever. Um, I don't care who moves in, etc. They're all going to be neighbors, friends. They have a dog or they don't have a dog. That's important to me, maybe. But those are sort of things. It normalizes being Jewish to a very large extent. Um, Being a diaspora Jew is a challenge, I think. It always has been a challenge, but I think it's more of a challenge today than it ever was in the past because the identity is more confusing, much more so.
Yeah.
And I don't recommend it really. Uh,
I think we
so
need both, but, yeah, I mean, I understand why, and I certainly love Israel in a very real sense as you describe it, but, there is potential here in the diaspora, and at some point, the contribution that we make could, through our own elections and through our own preservation of American democracy, could be what saves Israel.
maybe
Yeah,
my old line had always been, I don't expect it to happen. What would Israel be like if 6 million Jews with their money came to Israel next week? I mean, it would take a while, but in other words, that would also transform Israel to a very large extent. So,
we could live
it's.
in, the Riviera, I guess,
Hey,
yeah.
listen, yeah, we really don't have. There are only about 500,000 people in Tel Aviv. Just realize that there are less people in Tel Aviv than in Manhattan, and it's particularly larger than Manhattan. So there's plenty of space. We just have to build up a little bit more.
Right,
Uh,
yeah, 500,000, and they always seem to be in the same line that I'm in trying to get a cup of coffee, but, no. Anyway, Mark, I think we'll sign off from here. I want to encourage everyone to subscribe to Tel Aviv Diary and, of course, to, in this moment, my Substack as well, and I hope we'll get to do this again.
Absolutely, it's always a pleasure.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks so much.
thank
Take care,
you.
everyone. I'm gonna end this now, and you can all find it, hopefully archived if you missed any of it.
Okay, how does this work now? This is supposed to.